Hello everybody, this is Vance here, and welcome to my first ever video on this channel. I plan to do video essays, character and pop culture analysis, and also, later on, probably a lot more videos of this type. But now that I have introductions that are made and they're out the way, let's get started. I would like to pose you, the viewer, a question. What do you think would happen if a series was caught within the trap of its own brilliant writing? When a story reaches headlines and becomes so popular, it's labeled as one of the new big three of new gen anime mangas. To answer that question, you get Jujutsu Kaisen and its many interesting yet unexplored plot points. Without further ado, let's begin. With part 1, inconsistencies. In the first few arcs of Jujutsu Kaisen, we're introduced to Yuji, Sukuna, Megumi, Nobara, and Gojo. As we continue from the Fearsome Moon arc after Yuji's death, we're introduced to the use of curse techniques and binding vows. So in chapter 20, we get a proper introduction to curse techniques via Nanami explaining it to Yuji and indirectly the audience as an expose scene. While Nanami's technique ratio allows him to cut anything as long as within the 7-3 ratio, it allows him to do lots of damage with just a dull blade. Looking at a separate case like Yuji, we can see that his technique Divergent Fist is just an end lag of cursed energy output being delayed to his lack of mastery over cursed energy. Now this is perfectly fine. Nanami and Yuji are two different people, and Yuji is an amateur sorcerer while Nanami is an experienced one, and they shouldn't have the same kind of curse technique. Though it was explained by Gojo that most likely Yuji would inherit Sukuna's technique and later down the line be able to use it for himself after consuming Sukuna's fingers. It gave Yuji as a character an end in mind for the audience to envision him as a powerful Jujutsu sorcerer with the right work, ethic, and efforts. But in stark contrast to any other character, we don't see Yuji use Divergent Fist that often after the first 3 arcs of Jujutsu Kaisen, like, at all, bro. Now I will say, it's quite a useless technique if just applied raw. Yuji most likely understood this and started using it less and less, since it was just less effective than other means of cursed energy manipulation. However, later it is revealed his actual curse technique is a variant of Shrine, different to Sukuna's. Yet the sure hit effect of his domain is a double impact similar to Divergent Fist. Now, within reason, it doesn't really make any sense for his technique to be Shrine when the double impact is the guaranteed hit effect of his domain. Because the guaranteed hit effect of any domain is based on the property of the technique. Therefore, meaning it probably should have guaranteed the cleave hitting rather than the double impact. Now you could argue that Yuji isn't Sukuna and only inherited his technique, therefore making the double impact his technique. But that's not how Gege explains it. It stated that Yuji is simply a half of Sukuna's soul taken form, and that is how he is able to use Shrine. So within my opinion, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever within the realm of possibility and how techniques work. Because technically, if he was a split of Sukuna, his technique would be Shrine. So if it's Shrine, then why isn't it not just a variation of Malevolent Shrine for his domain? Or just a domain that guarantees the cleave effect like I said earlier. If it's explained that Yuji is a split of Sukuna's soul, which is why he was capable of eating his fingers without being taken over, it was also explained that his Shrine variant is different from Sukuna's, where he has to specifically choose what to cut rather than sending out indiscriminate slashes. Much like he was holding a pair of imaginary scissors and deciding what pieces of paper he was going to cleave out of the opponent. The reason being, they are two different sorcerers from different eras, and not that they have developed their techniques at different times for different reasons. This statement Gege makes removes merit from previously established information that was already cemented 100 plus chapters in. Not to mention, the explanation as to why they're different fundamentally makes no sense since the techniques are not based on the person's age or thought process. It's based on the set parameters of the technique and the built-in limitations of said technique. It creates another inconsistency that just makes a technique reveal a Deus Ex Machina without any prior build-up. And overall, it takes away from Yuji as a character, and just demerits his efforts and training along with any development his character has made to defeat Sukuna up to this point. On top of the already misplaced and poorly timed plot point of Yuji just being a split of Sukuna, in my opinion, Gege could have written that Yuji had developed the technique from consuming Sukuna's fingers and eventually had developed cleave for himself, now manifesting through the battle from the two. If you really think about it, it would have made more sense. It would have been more in line with what Gojo had said earlier and predicted, and it would have had the story come together and neatly wrap up. However, that is not what Gege did. It is explained that the cleave's developed purpose being rescuing Megumi, it can not only cleave the soul, but it can choose which target is cleaved. That would be a way better alternative way to write out the story, in my opinion, simply because the fact that it would make it look a lot less like a Deus Ex Machina and make it seem more like a show of Yuji's willpower to try and save Megumi in general. Now, another thing is how Yuji can absorb techniques, yet they had to go a confusing route by making Yuji a soul split of Sukuna. It makes no sense, and it just removes interest and built up conflict and rivalry between Sukuna and Yuji by making them predestined enemies without any prior establishment. And yet, from the very start of Jujutsu Kaisen, Yuji and Sukuna were always on opposing sides of the moral compass. You didn't have to make them soul-bound enemies. It doesn't really make sense. If you really think about it, they were already on opposing sides of the moral coin. So, not only were they already against each other, but they were actively fighting on who should have control over the body. This was already enough conflict as it was. To continue and build up off this conflict in Megumi's body is good, but they could have made it better. And I'll explain further, because this could have easily been put in, and it would have further developed their characters into one of the greatest inner demon and protagonist combos to date. With Sukuna and Yuji both hating their circumstance of being trapped together, along with Sukuna constantly being a hindrance to Yuji's moral code, opposing it, entirely being a roadblock for our protagonist. We see this in Shibuya and Sato Zakura High, when Sukuna taunts Yuji after begging him to fix Junpei. Mahito and Sukuna wholeheartedly laugh in Yuji's face, taunting him. This is a clear show of opposition to Yuji and his distaste for his host. We can also see this is when Sukuna purposely draws out his fight with Maharaga and extends the range of his domain in order to maximize casualties and damage. Prior to that, he wasn't able to cause such devastation or even take over Yuji's body by himself, because Sukuna lacked power and easy chances to take over Yuji, so he ended up mostly as an irritating, obstinate inner demon. In my opinion, Sukuna is the inner demon trope done correctly up until the Culling Games arc. But before we dive into that, we need to look at an integral part of Jujutsu Kaisen's plot problems. Before I start this section, before I even go any further, I just want you, the audience, and the viewers to know, I'm not a Gojo glazer, I'm not a Sukuna glazer. I'm actually more of a I think I'm a Takuma guy. I like Ino a lot, but besides the point. Just so you know, there's no bias in me writing this. This is just my personal opinions on how it turned out between the two, and I think how Gege impacted the story with his own personal biases against characters. So, moving on, the second part, author biases. Now, I got the disclaimer out the way. Sukuna vs. Gojo was a representation of what a one-sided fight would look like when a character's main traits and personality are ignored by the author. In my opinion, Gojo could have lived if Gege wasn't actively hating on Gojo. Sukuna was low on curse energy, had exhausted 90% if not all of his tools, and wasn't even able to use domain expansion or amplification. In this scenario, Gojo had won the fight. Now, it actually does make sense as to why Gojo had gotten world cleaved. Sukuna had observed Maharaga and how he used the world cutting slash trying to replicate the model. However, the timing does not make sense as he has the chance to use it along with hand signs. Now, people explain that in the situation he was in, he used a binding vow to use it without the former stated rules. However, if you think about it, this isn't a very fitting or respectful death for a character like Gojo. If you look at Shibuya and how they captured Gojo, Gojo was first worn out, distracted, and forced into a corner. Then on top of that, Kenjaku deliberately used Geto's face to trip up Gojo. Gojo got a fitting loss for a character of his caliber. Speaking of unfaithful shows of character, let's see what Gege did to Sukuna in the face-off. Now, in Gege and Sukuna's defense, it's very clear he did not plan to use a tool until he was forced to, since Arame delivered it after his fight with Gojo when he was severely injured. Now, if you're confused as to what I'm referring to, it's the divine martial solution the cursed tool Yoruzu had provided Sukuna with because she was so obsessed with that boy. She was like, I need it, I need the Sukuna malevolent meat. In addition to Sukuna's careless approach to the fight with Gojo, He also tried to counter a 200% hollow purple. Sukuna is not that dumb. I'm sorry to say it, but I just, from what we've previously seen established, Sukuna's not that stupid. And I'll continue explaining why. In that case, if Sukuna was not taking Gojo seriously at the start of the fight, that's fine to say, since Sukuna is egotistical. It's in his character. However, it's clearly inaccurate to his character for him to try and block a hollow purple. He's clearly seen one before, since he was most likely around since the conception of the technique, or saw it from Yuji's perspective. He's seen the damage it can do. He's seen how powerful it is. Sukuna's not that dumb. But there's also to factor in Sukuna outright being overwhelmed by Gojo's cunning and his use of technique in the battle. By all means, Gojo was the better equipped fighter with his technique, and Sukuna had copied a fair bit of Gojo's workarounds to reusing Domain constantly. Sukuna couldn't and wouldn't have had the time to think of a way to counteract Infinity the way he did with World Cutting Slash. As Sukuna himself was clearly overwhelmed by Gojo and caught with his pants down at the start of the fight, so his use of Maharaga is a smart move and accurate to his character. However, he had little curse energy at the time of use. Especially to be capable of cutting through time and space, Sukuna should have reincarnated at that point, and it would have been a more believable loss on Gojo's end. In tandem, they did not do Sukuna's character justice here. They actually showcased a more arrogant fighter than an experienced sorcerer turned curse. As for the hollow purple, Sukuna tried taking it on directly, which ended up almost fatal. The Sukuna we have seen from the start of the series, the same one that planned to take Megumi's body since chapter 5, would not make such a trivial mistake as to underestimate Gojo, since it's very likely he's seen hollow purple from Yuji's perspective like I previously stated. Now I won't say Sukuna couldn't have dodged it or found some sort of countermeasure to survive. However, there's also a very obvious point that the cursed energy was veiled behind Ichichi's barrier. So this is important to take into consideration, but even if he was caught by complete surprise, shouldn't the entire hollow purple make contact? It's very clear it was guaranteed to hit. Sukuna's preparations were two things: gathering all 20 fingers and bathing himself in curses to completely gain control of Megumi's body. Yet he did nothing else to prepare for his bout with Gojo. Gojo had set runner-ups to fight for him and people to amplify his first move within the battle. Now Sukuna may not have had many options to spare compared to Gojo, but Sukuna at the very least could have had Arame deliver a divine martial solution immediately at the battle's start. Sukuna wasn't written with much accuracy at this point in the story, and I feel as if his character would just continue to fall off, and honestly here's my point why. Now, before I get into this section, I'll define what misanthropy is. So, it is a general hatred of all of humanity. It is explained that when Sukuna was first born, he was a disliked child because he was ugly. However, at the same time, Sukuna chose the route he did with hating other people. Sukuna was human. He turned curse. He wasn't born a curse, he was a human who turned into a curse. Now that this has been elaborated and explained, that's why you know it's called misanthropy, and I'll keep going on why. Sukuna as a character is well written. Sukuna as an inner demon is even better written. Sukuna as a villain, however, is poorly done. Sukuna had no actual motivation to want to kill everyone within humanity past misanthropy. And when he incarnates and says, "Where are the people? The women? What a wonderful age this is! Women and children are spawning like maggots! Marvelous! It'll be a massacre!" When Sukuna incarnated into Yuji's body, it was clear he was a genocidal person. However, we're shown later he only does this because he was rejected by the world as an unwanted child. Sukuna's motivations for wanting to destroy humanity is primarily rooted in childish misanthropy, lacking depth. Even when people did show him compassion and even love, his misanthropy continued despite getting a follower so loyal she took her own life because she no longer had Sukuna around to follow. Arame is his greatest supporter and his most likely candidate as a lover. Arame from all the way from the Heian era to modern day has shown great support to Sukuna. She did everything in her power to appease him and make him happy. She fought for Sukuna with her life, along with even reincarnating for him to fight by his side, once again. Yet Sukuna was blind and ignorant to the idea of exploring love of any kind, as quoted by Sukuna when he fought Kashimo. "I understand love, and I say to you, love is worthless. I've never needed anyone to satisfy me. I eat when I want to eat, play with what amuses me, and kill whoever is in my way. I live as befits my nature. If no one can grasp that, then that's their problem." And not to mention, the fact he also had someone so desperately obsessed with him that she took genuine joy in dying to Sukuna's technique. Yorozu wasn't a supporter, but more or less a fan, as she saw Sukuna and wished to make him less lonely. spotting the lonely expression on Rame's side. She rushed him and claimed he wasn't alone anymore, hugging his head. Even with all this affection surrounding him, and even smothering him through reincarnated sorcerers, it's almost as if he genuinely chose to ignore the fact that anyone cared about him slightly, and just said, "Society is the problem, and I want the power to destroy it." As quoted here, "You should have burnt everything you decided to a cinder to reach the height of Satoru Gojo, and not worry about your future or identity. You lack the hunger to take hold of your desires." It's very clear that he didn't value anything past being strong. His own idea of strength blinding him and leading him to his demise. And we're supposed to believe that he's a Heian era genius sorcerer? Now I know that that's a part of his character, and by the end of the series he changes his perspective after losing, but I just don't find it as genuine of a motivation as Yuji had for hunting someone like Mahito, who tormented Yuji and killed his friend, mentor, and close friend. Or Maki's determination to become a powerful Jujutsu sorcerer so she can prove to the Zenin clan that she's actually worth something. To escape the life of abuse she constantly underwent in that clan. But instead, Sukuna's motivations outside of being a plot device were really childish and unbecoming of the Heian era's greatest sorcerer. Much like a child who wants to quit a game of tag after being told they're it. It takes away from his character's maturity and just makes him seem egotistical beyond reason. Most villains of Sukuna's type are misunderstood heroes, but Sukuna is just a childish villain with a lot of power. Compare Sukuna to Mahito, who was the main antagonist from the Versus Mahito arc to the Shibuya Incident arc, who is a curse born from people's misanthropy and anthrophobia. Anthrophobia is the fear of other people, from what I remember. Or fear of death, I think. So Mahito being the complete opposite of Yuji in every way, acting as his countermeasure and a stepping stool for his character's growth. As Yuji is kind-hearted in nature, Mahito is cruel and sadistic, getting pleasure from hurting humans, while Yuji takes great pride in protecting society from curses. He talks down to Yuji, giving a speech on how his beliefs are false and his determination is half-assed. As quoted here, "I bet you thought that you were going to do some pest control or ghost exterminations, like some make-believe story. You came to Shibuya with half-assed determination, didn't you? How naive. You stupid brat. This is war, not a battle to fix what's wrong, but a clash of truce. You and your fragile justice. You or me, Yuji Itadori. I kill without a second thought, just like how you save people without a second thought." In conclusion, compared to other characters, antagonists and protagonists, Sukuna as a solo act just does not compare, and it takes away from his character. What Sukuna could have done, or could have been, was a change in the inner demon trope in the manga scene, making him the most well-written one, but instead he turned into a terrible plot device that took away from the story rather than giving to it. Part 4, Gojo's childish grudge against Jujutsu's hierarchy. Now, a lot of people don't really understand what I'm going to mean by this. A lot of people, they just kind of see the ghetto situation and, kind of side with Gojo. But you have to remember, it is Gojo's fault for a lot of what happens, and I'll get into why. First, Gojo wished to kill the higher-ups of Jujutsu Society for all decisions that ultimately were products of his creation or the byproduct of themselves. Geto turning into a genocidal maniac was the result of Gojo, remember this, Gojo ignoring Geto's mental state and Geto being suggested extreme ideas by Yuki Tsukumo. As quoted here, "This is the life I've chosen. All I can do now is give it all I've got." He literally says he chose to kill those innocent people. It gets no more clear cut than that. He said it himself. If he's not blaming anyone, the victim of the situation does not blame anyone. It is very clear that they understand it was their decision to make, and that they had no outside influence. It was mostly their impact. They made that choice. It's also explained by Kenjaku. Taking over Geto's body was the result of Gojo refusing to properly dispose of Geto's body through means of cremation. As stated by Kenjaku Shibuya, you didn't have Shokoyori personally get rid of Suguru Geto's body, did you? When Gojo mentions feeling isolated and being alone, a lot of the time, it is the direct result of him isolating himself. As Shoko states in chapter 220, "But you idiot, who's alone? I was there all along. Shoko was there when Geto had decided to become a curse user and had known Gojo and Geto longer and more personally than anyone else within the Jujutsu Society. Geto would very likely have impacted Shoko as well, but she had different ways of coping with it. Whether you ship Geto or Gojo is up to you, but it's clear that Gojo had a deeper connection with Geto, that much is true. But Shoko still would have tried to understand Gojo and console him as a friend would. It's very apparent Gege likes to write about isolation, as he does it well with Yuta and Kashimo, along with many other characters, some of which being Wasuke Itadori, Yuji's grandfather, but that is because Yuta is isolated through means of bullying because he was followed by Rika, a murderer's overprotective cursed spirit, and Kashimo was isolated because he was born in an era without the powerful foes he desired to fight. Yet he sought to end that and get the solution of his loneliness by fighting Sukuna to understand that the feelings are mutual. He wanted to end his isolation even if it was through means of reincarnation. Meanwhile, Wasuke understood he was isolated and alone except for Yuji. He told Yuji to surround himself with good people and always take care of others. I like to believe that advice translates to his personal feelings about not being able to save Yuji's father from Kenjaku. Despite all these well-written characters that face isolation and loneliness, Gojo acts entitled as he literally had someone there to talk to or to at least relate. And he decided to ignore her as well. Much like Gojo, Sukuna is also childish. We're supposed to believe that these two are geniuses of their times, but lack basic emotional intelligence and can't discern affection. Outside of battle, they are ignorant towards others' feelings, and the writing enforces their ignorant points by saying, being strong makes you lonely, but never actually elaborating on why it does or how they tried to end their isolation. Instead, they were obsessed with power to the point where they consumed them both, and in the end, one of them turned into a misanthropist and the other into a sadistic curse killer who had a murder boner for the Jujutsu High executives. It's not Tengen's fault Rico died. It's not Tengen's fault Toji got past the barrier. He had no way to know Toji was capable of even finding Jujutsu High. He had Gojo and Geto gone straight to Jujutsu High, Rico would still be alive. If those two didn't slack off and go to the beach on a mission that was life or death, by the way. So, whose fault is that? I think he kind of sealed his own fate there. It's not Tengen's fault that Geto turned evil either. Gojo lacks the ability to own up to his actions. I believe power and isolation are two sides of the same coin in most scenarios, but many powerful people who are isolated tend to ignore those who do reach out to them, because all they seek is power. So if they don't meet another megalomaniac, megalomania is the desire to gain a lot of power, is an obsession with power. They will never relate to those who do care about them. Gojo and Sukuna are as stubborn as they get. And honestly, bruh, moving on to other stubborn people. One of my bigger points, the Kenjaku Nothing Burger. I liked Kenjaku as a villain. I enjoyed him a lot. I feel like the way he died was very disrespectful. And honestly, bro, getting speed blitzed off camera is actually kind of fucking crazy. So, Kenjaku Nothing Burger. At the end of the Shibuya arc, the merger is activated by Kenjaku via idle transfiguration. Mahito's technique, which allows the user to change the shape and information of the soul, he acquired the ability by absorbing the cursed spirit when Yuji had weakened him after his lengthy showdown. Using the technique, he was allowing sorcerers from the past to reincarnate into new bodies using this gateway, since idle transfiguration changes the shape and information of the soul. But the true motive of this plan was entertainment. Kenjaku is a psychotic monster and deserves more attention, as Kenjaku was a curious high-in-air sorcerer willing to test the limits of humanity for his research. This is previously shown when he makes deals with multiple sorcerers from an era to reincarnate into bodies in the modern era. Kenjaku has always carried out an aura of knowledge and a high intellect, making him stand out as a character. His motivations fit his character. However, Kenjaku dies after being caught by a sneak attack from Yuta Okotsu and later revealed with Aoi Todo, swapping him out in the last second and making this plan effective, so this plan goes down the drain after his untimely demise. Now, this is a perfectly fine conclusion, in my opinion, if the merger felt like an actual threat to the protagonist. Sukuna's appearance has stolen the show from Kenjaku being the main villain of the arc, and his pre-established appearance and screen presence turning into nothing more than an irrelevant subplot. His relevance as Yuji's mother never gets explored, and why he interacted with Jin Itadori in the first place. He never gets a proper flashback to how he acted as Kaori Itadori and why he stole her body specifically. It seemed like it was written as to make Kenjaku evil by manipulating some innocent bystander, but within reality, it makes Kenjaku look freaky, bro. It makes him look freaky as hell. Looking at how it's never explained what technique Kaori had that would make him go from choosing male host to a female host looks bad on Kenjaku's highly intellectual character. Kenjaku had the most ominous screen presence in Shibuya when he sealed Gojo, and it was an earned victory that had 60 plus chapters worth of planning. But by effectively forming a plan capable of catching Gojo off guard for a minute, trapping Gojo in a realm without interruption, and then doing a 2 versus 9, the buildup was there. His presence was established as a threat. He was and still would have been a good choice as Shinjuku Showdown's main villain. If Kenjaku was able to participate in an alternate version of the Shinjuku fight, where Sukuna had used his reincarnation to fully heal during the fight with Gojo after the purple nuke, Gojo would have lived as the other fighters would have hopped onto the battlefield in a rush, and we would now get to see Yuji, Sukuna, and the other sorcerers face off against Sukuna. We would still have Kashima's one-on-one showdown with Sukuna, as we'd watch the other fighters run in behind Kashimo as he outran all of them, attacking Sukuna in a hurry and getting taken out quickly. Gege could also write Gojo out of the fight by saying he was recovering from his injuries using a more slowed down version of RCT due to the damages and curse energy expenses of fighting Sukuna. Kenjaku would see Sukuna and rush to the battlefield to fight alongside him. So we get to see Jujutsu Sorcery of today versus Jujutsu Sorcery of the past for a second time. By adding Kenjaku to the fight, he can employ the merger as a timer to make the fight quicker and more intense, increasing the stakes, making them higher than Sukuna just killing everyone and dominating the fight, along with making it feasible to kill Kenjaku in an interesting way. The ending would have been much more satisfactory as the cycle of cursing is over, and the first year we have come to know and love would return back to Jutsu High as better, more developed people and characters. From an objective and personal standpoint, Gege wasted Kenjaku's potential as a villain and could have done a lot more with him. Sukuna's character would have been untouched from the fight with Gojo, and it would have still left it in a respectable, well-loved, and beautiful place from a writing standpoint. In conclusion, if Gege had more time to write a more detailed outline and satisfactory ending to the story, he wouldn't have received as much backlash as he did. I believe if we were able to see Gojo and Yuji fight alongside each other as a show of power to compare Yuji from start to end of Jujutsu Kaisen, it would have been wonderful. Showing Yuji use domain expansion to fight Sukuna using versions of the two from different eras in their life. Eventually finishing off with present Yuji and Sukuna would have been great. I said that Megumi could have had some time to talk to Yuji within the domain by showing Yuji knocking out Sukuna and allowing him time to speak to Megumi, still giving Yuji's domain that emotional feeling to it. Eventually their time is up to speak in Megumi's soul, and Sukuna regains control once again. After Megumi's morale is boosted, Yuji would clasp fists with Sukuna, using a cleave to cut off his other 3 arms. Sukuna would smirk as he realized he would overpower Yuji, letting his guard down, and the double impact would hit him, leaving him open for a black flash. As Sukuna is separated from Megumi, he tries to re-enter Megumi's body, causing Yuji to step in front of him and squat down to his level. He talked to Sukuna about how he knows him best and he wouldn't mind being cursed together. Sukuna still rejects Yuji and says, "Don't insult me." As he's fading away, he'd monologue about how he would be able to enter Megumi's body if he was quick enough, but ultimately decided against it, saying to himself, "I admit defeat, Itadori Yuji." But yeah, I think that would be a great ending to Jujutsu Kaisen. It still would have wrapped up the story perfectly. It would have given Sukuna's character a lot more depth and shown just from the start to end his redemption. And I think the ending, like the ending panel with Sukuna and Arame, was a lot better than a lot of people painted it out to be. I think it was pretty good. I think it had a decent emotional impact on the audience. But I believe that in Sukuna's final moments, they should have shown more humility, as it would have been the start to a good change. And overall, I think that Jujutsu Kaisen is still a good story, even with all its setbacks and flaws. However, it could have been done better executed. But overall, that's what I think could have been made it better. So thank you for watching. If you've got this far, I really appreciate it. Make sure you honestly like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow the channel, get more people to see my content. I really wanted to do stuff like this for a while. So if you could do that, thank you. Have a good one.